Well, welcome and good day, everyone. We are, of course, glad you guys are here again with us for another Talk It Over. And, of course, today I have Dave with me.
Hey.
So welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And, again, another great message in our series, God Is. But, yeah, before we dive into that too far, we're going to get caught up here on how our weeks have been. So, Dave, how has your week been?
It was not too bad. Was under the weather for about a day or so, and so that wasn't great. But, you know, it's snowing and it's cold here, so I wasn't really missing too much.
Yes.
But other than that, things have been going really well. And God has really been providing and leading, so, yeah, it's been good.
Good.
How about for you?
Yeah, things have been pretty good. Things are going well. Emmett's doing well. Things are going good there. Yeah, nothing too crazy to report at the moment. So.
Well, we did have the birthday dinner.
We did, yes. We did have a birthday dinner. That is right. Celebrating my birthday, my wife's birthday.
That was a good meal, too.
Yeah, it was. It was a good meal. It was a good evening, good atmosphere. Had a lot of fun. It was nice that we have that opportunity with, of course, restrictions being loosened, that we were able to all be able to get out in a group and be able to do that. So that was it was quite enjoyable last night. Certainly can't complain. It was good to do that. We haven't done that in quite a while.
It's funny, right? How often now when you go out for a nice meal, you get 2 meals out of it. Like that's the standard now, right?
It seems to be
you
that
eat
way.
Like
yeah.
half, and then the next day you get to eat the other half. So then when you're paying for it, it's like it's not as bad because I'm getting more out of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's that does seem to be the standard. Yeah, I usually get about half, and then gotta pack her up. So take her home and have it the next day. Yeah. So things have been good. So let us know, guys, in the chat how things have been with you guys. Any maybe have a praise report, something that God's been doing in your life that we can be celebrating, of course, with you guys. Or maybe it's just a pretty straightforward week, something that's just been fairly normal, nothing too exciting, but just continuing to enjoy what God has been doing in your life. So our series, of course, continuing week 2. God is. Excellent message. If you haven't had a chance to watch the first one, or maybe even haven't watched the second one, you of course can check those on our YouTube channel at LifeNorth.Church. They are all available, so you guys can stay caught up on exactly what we're all discussing each week. So the message title today was Living Without Worry, which I think a lot of us tend to live with more worry than maybe we think about. So excellent message. It was step-in pastor for us this week. It was Tim Doremus. He brought the message, very powerful, and a lot of emotion involved with his message, which I thought was really good. Check it out if you haven't yet. It was excellent. So I like kind of how he started the message with what keeps you up at night. I thought that was kind of an interesting lead-in, but also kind of sparked some ideas of
Get you thinking?
Yeah, what's my mind running with? What's it racing away with? What's causing me maybe not to get as much sleep as maybe I should be getting? So I thought that was really good.
Because sometimes we're not even aware of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like your mind is racing, but you're not really thinking about like what is it that's really bothering me. You're just kind of staying up late and not really sleeping well, and so it was a good lead-in. It
was. And again, I like the point he brought that, again, I think we forget about it a lot, that when we worry about, what we worry about the most is generally where we trust God the least.
That was such a powerful statement.
It was.
Right? Because it gives real insight into, I'm worried about this, and then kind of flipping it 180 degrees and going, okay, why aren't you trusting God with that? Like, what is it about that you're owning on to and not giving to Him? And just good insight then. It is.
And excellent insight, and really just, a great perspective. The perspectives, again, he brought this week were outstanding. Yeah. And I kind of like the 2 statements he brought about, is God trustworthy? Yeah. God is trustworthy. Same stuff, switch 2 words, and it changes the whole dynamic of how we think about what God is or who God is. Yeah. And Him being that trustworthy God that we can trust in. And yet sometimes we find ourselves not trusting Him. It's a very interesting concept. Yeah. It was good.
Because you can have the information up here and know it to be true.
Yes.
But not really believe it enough that you live it out. right? There can be a disconnect between
There
knowledge and really holding on to that truth. And I know even in the church, sometimes we get so caught up in the information and think, oh, I got it now.
Yes.
Because I agree with it. I believe it at an intellectual level. But then, do you really?
Yeah.
And that's where the heart level comes in and whether you worry about it or not. And so using, working in vehicles, right? Using worry as like the warning light.
Yep.
Right?
It's flashing.
This is the one that's saying, you're not trusting God here. You're not trusting God here.
Yep.
That's good.
Yeah, it was. I like the 3 points that he kind of brought about what it looks like to be, living without worry, and kind of those 3 points. So we got to remember that God has been faithful, of course, before and in the past. Brought in 2 kind of good stories, some from Scripture with Moses about all the things that God has shown us, and we've trusted God, and He's brought us through, and He's moved us through, and an excellent Scripture that really kind of defines that God has been faithful to us. I of course like the one where he talked about his car, bringing his personal story about getting a bill and he doesn't make enough money to pay for it, and then his wife talks about the change in the closet, and it turns out to be exactly the right amount that they needed. So just that faithful, that he's been faithful. I love those analogies, and then remembering that God is faithful today. And that he is with us. He's always with us, and we can trust him to be there with us each and every day. I really quite enjoyed that. And then also remembering that God will be faithful tomorrow, and looking into the future, because I think a lot of our worries focus more on the future of what's uncertain or what we may not know. But what we do know is God will be faithful to us in the future. And I like the analogy that he brought about, we need to hold on to something better, and that better is him. And the analogy of the rock climbing, his wife, and scared of going up, and then got stuck at the top, and, figuring out that, no, you just have to hold on to the rope to get down. And just that visual idea of that God's that rope, that we need to let go of the stuff that maybe is right in front of us to grab something better to get us through that difficult time. So I thought that was really good. And then again, closing it off with a very similar statement as he opened with was, what are you holding on to? So are you holding on to those worries, or are you holding on to the better God? And again, I thought that was excellent how he kind of wrapped that together, kind of brought it all through. So before we dive into these questions, we're just going to dive into a scripture here, kind of one that really kind of, I think, ties the message well together. It is found in Matthew 6, verses 25 and 27. So, therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?
It's so practical, right? The scripture is like, what is it accomplishing by worrying? Did it change anything? Did it add to your life? Did it add value to your life? And it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't do anything.
If anything, it pulls things out of your life. It pulls things away from you. You lose things over gaining anything, for sure. So, bringing us back to, of course, our childhood, which we come back to a bunch.
We do.
What are some of the fears that you had when you were a child?
Oh, so one of the ones that was big for me was I was afraid of the dark. I was one of those kids that I was afraid of the dark. And so it had to be a night light on, had to have my door open, a hallway light had to be on. That was all important because, there's stuff living in the room in the dark when my parents weren't around. And so that was a big one for me. I mean, eventually, thankfully got over that. And was able to embrace, but at the time, it was terrifying. I was very worried about that.
Yeah, that's a big one. Same thing for me, that idea of sleeping in the dark. And it was like, had to have the light on, had to be tucked in real tight, so like I couldn't move.
Weren't you trapped then? If you're tucked in tight,
it felt like being trapped, but it was almost like that security of like I'm coddled almost like a baby would be, and they like to be tight. And of course, door had to be open, closet had to be closed, because if not, you get those creaks in the floor, or those things that you never hear during the day, but it's only in the dark is when you hear these noises, and then the furnace starts up, and you're like, "What's that?" And it's again, got over, of course, that as I grew up and moved past, of course, those fears, but
we replaced them with other fears.
Different fears that take over that seem to be more scary than the creaks in the floor.
What's under the bed? Yeah.
So I don't know what is that for you guys, but please leave a comment in the chat. Let us know. Maybe you had a similar fear to what we had. Maybe something completely different. But let us know, and we would love to, of course, connect with you and get back to you on those questions. So, again, being such an impactful message, was there a part of the message that was really impactful for you, Dave?
The one part that really grabbed me, and I'm still thinking about even now, is that analogy of the wall climb. And his wife went up to the top, and she's at the top, terrified because she's afraid of heights. And him saying, just let go. And thinking, that's probably what I would do. I would say to her, just let go. You can trust me, you can trust the rope. And she's too scared to let go. And then instead, Tim's friend saying, no, just grab onto the rope one hand at a time. And you're going to transfer your trust from the wall to the rope.
Yep.
Because I thought, that's what we do sometimes is I communicate to myself and others, like just abandon yourself to the fear, God's got you. And that's not good advice because you literally have to throw yourself into your fear.
Yes.
But that idea of no, transfer who you're holding on to someone or something else.
Yes.
And so in worrying, you're doing it yourself. I'm holding on to myself. I'm going to look after this.
Yep.
And if I could transfer that to no, I'm going to hold on to God, that would be so powerful. And then there's not that sense of I have to leap right into my fear. It's no, I'm going to hold on to a God who's there for me.
Yep.
It was so good. So I know I'm going to be mulling that over for quite a while.
Yep. For me, it was the story that he had with the husband and wife that had come to Life Church. It really struck me because my story is similar in the sense of being in the hospital, before they're even born, getting information that things aren't right, that there's going to be complications. And that journey about what did we turn to? We could turn to, we're going to just do this ourselves and not, trust anybody. Yeah. Or we can turn to church family, turn to God and trust that He's got us and we've got people around us to support us. And seeing the similarities of what they chose to what we chose, and then wanting to share their story, which we've shared our story. Yeah. And again, talking to other families and creating, they went Instagram, we did Facebook story, and people could stay connected. And again, bringing that inspiration of that, God's a part of this and He's working through this and we're going to get through it. And
he talked about hitting that point where this is not what we wanted, God, but we're still going to trust you anyway.
Yes.
And you guys had a similar story, didn't you?
Yes, I certainly did.
Yeah.
Because again, identical to them, we're praying for one thing and we're praying for the miracle. And we're praying for God to make the healing, to do, make them better and relieve all the stresses and pains that they're having, and not getting that answer. Yeah. And it's hard because you get into that point where it's like, well, then can I trust God because I didn't get what I was praying for? And you have to really, again, it was a really deep mulling it over and battling through that those feelings and figuring out that the plan is still the same. The outcome that we had was different, but it doesn't mean that it's not what was the plan, the direction that the God had for us. Yeah. And so being able to trust God that the direction He still has us on is the direction we're supposed to be on. It took time to really kind of work through that, and really just have supporting people around us to try to help us understand and work through those difficult conversations and that time of worry of why didn't this happen? Yeah. Because it's in times like that you can certainly have big worries, and your worries can really affect your emotions, and then you can make decisions on those emotions that are, of course, maybe not the best decisions you could, of course, be making. So, excellent message again. Super powerful and definitely one to watch. Certainly can definitely bring up a lot of emotion for you and maybe where you're at and how you're maybe struggling through things with God. And it's okay to struggle with those things, but have that support there and know that God is with you. He has people around you to support you, and you'll get through that because that's the plan that you're on. That's where he's got you going.
Just got to trust him.
You got to trust.
Got to trust him.
So that, of course, that was a good. It was an excellent message. Yeah. Excellent message for sure. If someone asked you, Dave, why God is trustworthy, what would you say to them?
I think Tim unpacked that really well. I think part of the reason why I know God is trustworthy is because he's been trustworthy in my life and in the lives of so many people that I know. And I see him show up again and again and again in ways that makes me recognize that he is trustworthy. And then I also know that God, as the creator, obviously has the power and the knowledge to do all of this. And he tells me you can trust me. And so I believe him. I take him at his word.
Yep.
And so those are the two big ones that come to mind for me, is that he's been trustworthy. He's proven it over and over and over again. And I don't even have to go back to like the children of Israel Bible stories. Like I just look at my own life and in lives of people that I know and love, and God just shows up over and over and over again.
Yep.
And so I've got that, and the fact that God says that's who he is, and so I can trust him.
I think it's very similar for me. Certainly for me, the trusting part came later for me, where I would trust God. But seeing him show up in different areas, so in finance and in relationships and, in those difficult moments where things seem to be at their lowest, and seeing God kind of show up there, it certainly makes me be able to share that story and say, no, he is trustworthy. He's been there for me in those times when things were hard and difficult. And I have no other reason to, again, as you said, take him at his word that he says he there. Like I don't have a reason not to, because he's shown up for me. And he can show up for any of us. We just have to trust that he will be there and know that he will be there for us. And I think that's a kind of big part of just trusting God. And again, that analogy of Adam and Eve, as he went back to Adam and Eve.
Yep.
You've got God where you can't see, it's not physical, and then you've got the apple.
Yeah.
And seeing what that looks like, and seeing that, oh, this is right here, and this is a desire, and this is right, and not having that physical piece from
makes it
God.
harder.
It does.
And yet we know how that worked out, right?
We do.
That didn't work out so well, and it doesn't work out well for us.
No.
When we trust in ourselves and what we can see, what we can hold on to.
Yep.
And I guess that's probably another proof, isn't it? Is the opposite, where I didn't trust God. I really did it on my own.
Yep.
And it did not work out well.
Yep.
And for myself or other people. And then you get that reinforcement of like, wow, if you're going to just rely on yourself, you're going to be in trouble. Instead, take it to God. He is faithful. You can trust him.
I think having those people around us that we can really connect with on that spiritual level, that can help bring some wisdom, because as we know, the serpent, of course, twisted some of the words around enough to get Eve wondering, well, is this real, right? Is God trustworthy? Can I really take him at his word, right? And so again, it ties back to the people, the decisions, the things that we make really determine the direction we're going. And if we're listening to bad influences, that can really affect the choices we make. And oh, well, no, I can do this on my own. I don't need God for this. And again, those choices can really have bad outcomes.
That's a good point. Whether you trust or not is influenced by the people around you, who you listen to, who are close to you. And so you want to have people that are steering you towards God and good decisions, because you can be steered away. Really speaking that good truth into your life, and having those people around you that you can really count on to be there for you, certainly make a big difference. I know for me, making those decisions on trusting certainly help and guide me in that direction for sure. That's good.
So we're gonna go back Old Testament here. We're gonna hit Exodus. So we're going back to Moses.
Okay.
We're gonna do Exodus 13, verse 3. So, and Moses said to the people, remember this day in which you departed from Egypt, from the house of slavery, for by a powerful hand of the Lord brought you out from this place. And it's hard, again,
Well, you know what? It's good because God is saying, remember, because you're going to forget. He's telling the nation, like, I've done all of these miracles for you. I've provided in big ways that were so obvious. And we think, like, how could you ever forget that? Like, you were there and experienced it, right?
Yes.
How could you? And God's like, no, you need to remember because you're going to forget. And I don't know about you, but for me, I have had moments like that where God has done it and it's been like so obvious.
Yep.
And yet a year later, 5 years later, I'm doubting again. And I'm being just like the nation of Israel you're reading about, where it's like, how could you do that? You got to remember.
And that's exactly kind of what this question is about. It's about sharing that time and experience of God's faithfulness, of course, in the past. And again, tying into what you're saying there, Dave, with his physical analogy is, you're being told, look at what God has done, look at where you're going, and then he's like, how could you be such idiots?
Yes.
Like you've had such hardship and such trials, and God's brought you through all of that, and yet you can't even take a step out to go scout out the promised land, and you won't even do that.
Yeah.
And God's done so many things for you. And looking back at saying, you guys are idiots, but then it's like, I've been that too, though.
Yeah.
And realizing, no, I've kind of not done exactly what I've been asked.
Yeah, same thing.
And again, I think we all, of course, tie into that for sure. Man, an experience of faith, God's faithfulness in the past. That is excellent.
Yeah, I know. I can think of a few that come to mind. And ironically, we're going through a situation right now where there's a challenge in that area. And having to do I trust all over again. And it should be easier than it is. I should know better, but I don't. And I remember we first started the church.
Yep.
So Carolyn and I really felt like God calling us to start Life North.Church. And at the time, I was just finished with a job and looking for employment. And Carolyn was only working just very, very part-time. And we sat down and figured out our finances. And it was like, if we're going to make this work, God, then Carolyn needs to be offered this much more work. Otherwise, we can't make it.
Yep.
We can't make it go.
Yep.
So I'm going to put myself full-time into starting the church. She needs to get this much more work. And that I think it was the very next day, she's walking through the hallway at her workplace and her boss coming up and saying, would you be willing to work this much more time because we really need you? And it was exactly what we had been talking about and praying about. And when God lines it up exactly like that, it's just that affirmation of like, this is not some kind of coincidence. It's like Tim saying we needed $213 and there was $213 in the jar. It's just God saying, you can trust me. Like, I've got this. And that's exactly what he did for us. And so when we come now to areas where can you trust God in a tough financial situation and yet still like, and I'm being like the nation of Israel. I should be able to look back and go, no, he came through exactly time and time again. But I still do.
Yeah, I kind of similar, but more with like the tithe. And I know we've talked about, of course, tithing and stuff in the past. But for me, growing up, it was always, you got to hold on to all of it because there may not be enough. And you get this very scarcity mindset. And growing up like that, that's just what I knew. That's what I knew. And so for me, it was always, I'd hold on to all of it, and then I would give, I'll give you just a little bit now, right? And really not experiencing, what it meant to tithe. And so when that tithe challenge came up, I of course was skeptical, that being that scarcity mindset. I'm very skeptical on, that's not going to work. If I give up more, I'm going to have less. So how is this going to work? Right? And taking that step with, of course, encouragement to, do this and you'll see a change. And before that, it was always, hold on to it. And, me and my wife, we're making it by, but there's not a lot. Right. And so we're like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this tithe and we'll see where things go. And just seeing God step into that and seeing the difference of how my heart changed with even just my finances in general, how my heart changed. And then seeing that even that 10%, even though it's all God's, giving that 10% back and seeing the blessings that came out of that. And all of a sudden it's not as difficult. We're not just making it by. It's hard to exactly explain until you experience it. But seeing God working in that finance and working in my heart and changing, my perspective now. If somebody asks me, well, why do you tithe? I am more than happy to explain to them how I tithe and why I tithe and what it did for me. And so just seeing God working in that and just trusting him there, it's like, But
that's kind of the key, isn't it? What you're talking about, trusting him there. And before that, it was, I trust in my money, right?
Yeah, my knowledge, my knowing.
God's given me this cash and this is all I have.
Yep.
And I'm going to trust in that. And this one simple practice forces you to trust him when it comes to your life instead of the money that God will provide.
Yep.
And that lesson gets learned over and over. You guys learned that lesson with Emmett in the hospital. Like, you can't trust in the medical system. You can't trust in, these are good things. The money is good things. But you got to trust in God. It's where it's got to be.
Yeah, you got to trust in God, and God got to trust in his plan and what he's got for you. And again, it's sometimes hard to explain the trusting part, but once you start trusting and you see those areas start to build with trust in God, more areas start to multiply in that area. And you find yourself just, I find myself less worried about things. Yeah. Of course, I still have worries. I think we all do. But yeah, working in those areas that I'm not worried about.
Do you go back to that area, finances? Is that still an area where you struggle?
Sometimes, yes. It sometimes can be. And you see a bunch of bills come in and it's all at once, and it's oh my goodness, how are we gonna do this? Yeah. And then it's I gotta kind of kick myself and say, no, God's got us through the difficult times, and we continue to trust him. So I need to trust that he's got this. It's, but when things stack up, it's almost like when things stack up in any area. If you get a few things stacked up, it seems oh my, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
How are we going to get through this?
So how do you remember? For our family, we're blessed in that my wife, she's the storyteller in our household. And she reminds us of these good stories over and over and over again, which we need desperately. And so I'll forget something and she'll be remember when God did this, and tell the story. And it's oh, how could I forget that? And so what do you do to remember those stories?
Well, it was kind of shared between me and my wife, where we would, all of a sudden we'd be in one moment where one of us was struggling, and the other, of course, would bring up something from the past. Yeah. It's funny, I'm now starting to see it in, of course, my son. He brings up funny little memories of things when he sees us maybe having something difficult, and then he says something and it triggers. And it's no, you're right. God did help us in that moment. Yeah. Why am I worried about this now? And just seeing his perspective in some of those moments when things are difficult or dealing with a medical thing, he just seems to spark up some remembrance of when we trusted God and how we got through it. It sparks a memory for us and helps us to work through those difficult points.
What a gift that is. That's fantastic.
It is amazing. It certainly is.
Yeah.
And having his perspective as a 6-year-old, it certainly changes the mood of things when you're in those circumstances, when you have a very energetic and funny little guy that just pops up with funny comments.
Yeah, good insights.
So let us know, guys, what might that be for you? Yeah. Again, those experiences when God was faithful. Or maybe you're in that moment right now where that faithfulness is maybe being stretched and you're not sure. We, of course, encourage you guys to continue to trust God. He has you. And maybe it's having some prayer. And if you need a prayer for something, please let us know.
Yeah, please do.
We would love to be praying for you guys. If you're having that struggling moment, we have a team that can pray for that and really, bring that to God and have God kind of working in that to help, of course, get you through those difficult times. So, of course, man, we fly through these things each and every week. It's, of course, excellent. I, of course, love this each and every week. It is a blast, and I hope you guys enjoy it just as much as we do. And, of course, we want to thank you guys for joining us each and every week. And, of course, we love to have you. We want to thank, of course, our tech team behind us, of course, making this all happen, getting us all set up, all posted, all put online. We just thank you guys so much for doing that.
Yeah, and if you know somebody that you think this would encourage, share it with them. Send them the link. let them know. YouTube, we've got the podcast version of it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Yeah.
And exactly. And even if you wanted to start a life group, of course, you can dive deeper into these questions in a life group, get extra perspectives. And you know what? You can even throw the podcast on in your life group.
Yeah.
Have that playing, have our perspectives. Have us kind of there with you guys.
That's right. We could join the group.
We could join your group.
Yeah.
So, if you guys are looking into that, please do. You and two friends can certainly start a life group and really dive into these messages even more than, of course, we do each and every week. And, of course, we want to remember, whoever finds God
finds life.
life.